Good morning or good afternoon. We will be starting the webinar in 1 minute. People are still coming online at this moment. Please stay tuned. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon and good morning. Good to see so many people attending the webinar from the Americas and, of course, Europe. The title of today's webinar is How Sophisticated Data Solutions Are Transforming Asset Management and O&M, and it comes as a prelude to our conference, Solar Asset Management Europe. My name is Kostis Tzanakakis. I'm project manager at Solarplaza, and I will be moderating this webinar. So what's the agenda for today? First, we will start with a short introduction to our webinar and the panelists. Ben Hansen and Zach Kreifels from SMA America will discuss how carefully examining dynamic plant conditions with sophisticated data analytics create the opportunity for O&M providers to optimize a custom maintenance schedule, thus securing the long-term profitability of the plant. And then Vishal Punamiya from Sitemark, previously known as StrongGrid, will be presenting the methods of deploying and integrating aerial data within an organization at scale and the common mistakes that asset managers make when working with aerial data. There will be time afterwards for Q&A, and we will end after approximately 1 hour. Once again, my name is Kostis, and I'm project manager at Solarplaza. I work on the solar asset management conferences in Europe and North America, and these are my contact details, so feel free to get in touch with me if you have any questions regarding solar asset management and our conferences. For those of you that don't know Solarplaza that well, we are a global information platform for solar PV. Our main business is organizing high-level B2B conferences and trade missions, and we have organized over 100 in the last 13 years that we are in business in more than 30 countries. And we have quite an extensive network of over 60,000 solar professionals, and of course, growing every day. This webinar is a pre-call to our yearly conference, Solar Asset Management Europe. This is the 6th edition of the conference. It will be held in Milan on October 23rd and 24th. And this is Europe's leading conference dedicated to the optimization of the operational phase of PV plants and portfolios. The main conference topics are, of course, O&M, financial and technical asset management, advanced data analytics, innovative technologies, PPA is a hot topic again this year, storage, and of course, many more. These are some of the companies involved so far, so don't miss a chance to meet the professionals of all these organizations at the conference. Special thanks to our sponsors, including SMA and Sitemark, for making our conference and content possible. Some practical notes: if you have any technical issues during the webinar, please use the chat box, probably on the right side of your screen as you see the GoToWebinar app. For Q&A, please also make use of the chat box. Please send us your questions during the presentations, and we will address as many as possible afterwards. The presentation slides and the video recordings will be available afterwards at our website, www.solarassetmanagementeu.com. So our first speaker is Ben Hansen, Senior Manager for Global O&M Service Solutions at SMA. In this role, Ben leads project management efforts to design the O&M solutions that SMA offers around the globe. And prior to joining SMA, Ben worked extensively in the construction and technology industries with companies such as AT&T and Cisco Systems. The second speaker, also from SMA, is Zach Kreifels, O&M Performance and Analytics Product Manager. In this role, he works with sales and operations to develop, price, and market new solutions, ensuring each facility managed by SMA performs optimally. And he has previously experience with First Solar and Black & Veatch. On the side of Sitemark, we have Vishal Punamiya, CEO of the company. He brings over 13 years of corporate experience of managing regional and global IT organizations in Germany, Belgium, Sweden, Switzerland, and the US, where he has deployed innovative and market disruptive solutions. And he's passionate about connecting new technologies to mainstream applications that address real business needs. Okay, so it's time to begin the presentations. Ben, I will give you control of the...
Okay.
All right. You're good to go, Ben.
All right. Thank you very much. Appreciate that introduction, Kostis. Again, my name is Ben Hansen, Senior Manager for Optim O&M Solutions for SMA. We lead the product development group for O&M. That group is based in California right now, but our SMA's Optim O&M group has maintenance contracts totaling 3.5 gigawatts all over the globe. We also have our O&M field service engineers and technicians spread all over Europe, North and South America, and we're also growing rapidly in Australia. Currently, we have 2 solar monitoring hubs, one in Ulm, Germany, and another in Rockland, California. Our data analytics R&D is taking place at our headquarters in Kassel, Germany. And currently, our performance analytics are coming from a mix of performance engineers and proprietary software that we've developed in Kassel. And Zach may touch a little bit more on the details on our methods a little bit later. I'll go ahead and go to the next slide here. Here we go. So what we'll be covering, first, we're going to use analytics, how to use analytics to detect unknown issues. Secondly, using performance analytics to minimize operational expenses. And then thirdly, optimizing maintenance schedules to impact profitability. So here's a scenario. Let's say that, we'll go ahead and build out this slide here. You've just done the preventative maintenance on schedule. We've done all the inspections. Everything seems to be working well. No alarms are going off in the SCADA system. Nothing was picked up in the IV curve trace that you just did for 25% of your plant, nor in the string monitors. We typically find that in the Americas, there's not much for string monitoring going on, but in Europe, there is quite a bit of string monitoring. However, the plant is putting out less power than it should. So we want to know what's going on with that. So that'll bring us up to our first poll question. I think, Kostis, you've got that, correct?
Yeah, bring it up 1 second.
Okay. All right. So the question is, what percentage of your plants or solar parks have some unknown issue that was not apparent in the SCADA or the initial inspections? Was that less than 10% of your plants, 25%, 50%, or 75% or greater? And again, the question is, what percentage of your plants had some unknown issue that you didn't see right away in the SCADA or the initial inspections? Okay, so this is interesting. Less than 50% of the people said less than 10%, and that means that the other 50 had some unknown issue that they didn't discover right away. We asked this poll question previously to attendees in the Americas, and that first number was less than 25% of the attendees had it at 10%. There's a greater spread across the board here, and that might actually signify something a little bit different in Europe than what you see in the Americas, and I would say that would be the case given the maturity of the market there. Let's go ahead and go back to the slides. Okay. So we'll talk about using analytics to detect unknown issues. A review of 30,000 installations in Europe found that 80% of them are underperforming, and this is reported in the New York Times several years ago. And I thought that number was just astounding, that 80% were underperforming. So we want to know why that is, right? All plants have issues, at least some issues that we don't see right away. At SMA, we tend to see many of those issues show up as alarms or errors in the inverter. And that will happen no matter where they're happening in the plant, because much of that data and information tends to come through the inverter. What we're also seeing is that modules and cabling are responsible for over 60% of issues at the plant or the solar park. And those could be things like glass breakage, PID. We also see bypass diode failures, module disconnects, short circuits, and cell cracks. Inverters, however, tend to have far fewer issues, but with greater impact when you do have one. Inverters tend to be good connection points for data on the plants, and so often these are the lowest level of data available. So we're always looking to the inverter in many cases to see what's going on in the plant. And also often we don't often have a lot of sensor data in the DC field. Usually the string monitoring is the lowest level that we'll get to, and we don't really see or understand what's going on too much at the module level. And even if there are sensors, some of the problems that we might have, sometimes we do have too much data coming in, and what I mean by that is there's so much data coming in that we don't have alarms or logarithms set up to detect and understand what that data is doing. And when that happens, even though you've got lots of data coming in, it's sometimes difficult to spot real problems that are going on. And then even in some cases, you may not have any alarms set up at all. So you're not seeing things that are happening in your data that you're already getting in. Even IV curve tracing can only show the percentage of the plant that was inspected. It's really rare that IV curve tracing will be done on a full plant, and so you're not going to get much out of that. And we all know there's a large shift away from IV curve tracing in general, and really to move that as a diagnostic tool after the fact. And I'm sure Vishal will talk a little bit about that later in his presentation as well. So consequently, visual inspections, aerial thermography, they can give a good view of the entire plant. But again, they're only as good as how often that we do them, right? Typically, those types of things are done annually. So in the big picture, we know that customers want good analytics performed on their assets. Utility-sized plants, and especially portfolios, sometimes they present too much data to see the smaller patterns that are going on with them. We also see that investors are very interested in getting good data. They're far more interested in the good calculations that are used, algorithms and methodology, even more so than exactly what software is used to get it. So it's really important that smart owners and operators know that the proper use of big data can really improve plant and portfolio performance, and you can improve reliability with less downtime and more energy output. So at this point, I'm going to transition over to Zach. Again, Zach is our product manager for performance and analytics in our PV portfolios, and he will pick it up from there and talk a little bit more about data and how we use it.
Thank you, Ben. Zach, you have control of the presentation already. And just a reminder to the audience, if you have any questions, you can already use the chat box for it. Zach, you have the floor.
Thanks, Ben. So, as most would expect, the end result of an analytics program is to maximize plant availability and plant output, as well as reduce operational expenses. There are several steps to getting usable insights from the data. First things first, data integrity is key in order to accurately see what's happening at the solar plant. If your sensors are uncalibrated or having communication problems, stuck data points, or data dropouts, it's going to affect the quality of your analytics. And remember, flawed data leads to flawed conclusions, which leads to uninformed decisions for your maintenance program. Unfortunately, all systems will have data problems at some point, so it's important to have robust processes in place to make managing it easy and scalable. Some best practices to achieving quality data are making sure you import all your data into data records into a single database with an organized structure, and avoid having multiple monitoring solutions. And it's also important to have data backups of those data points as well. And this allows for process repeatability and reduces troubleshooting on multiple systems, which is essential as you scale your analytics program for multiple sites. The next step is to create automatic processes to help aid in data recovery and correction, and if and when data problems occur. This often includes filtering alarms to remove those noise from false positive sensor alarms. And it's also important to have automated data recovery and interpolation, collect data that may have been lost due to data problems or not transferred. So once you have scrubbed the data, the next step is having some solid statistical techniques to use on your data. First, it's helpful to have access to some data specialists with a background in data science or getting useful information from data. At SMA, we have several data scientists who really enjoy working on this kind of thing. As well as using statistical analytics on your data, benchmarking is also a helpful form of analysis. Data is only helpful in comparison to something similar or a set of constraints. At a minimum, this should be done at the plant level, for instance, benchmarking an individual inverter's performance against nearby inverters, or even plant-wide inverters plant-wide. This is the easy way to spot chronically underperforming inverters and is the beginning of comparative analysis on your solar assets. And sensor readings like pressures, temperatures, voltages, power output can be compared and trended over time to help detect problems in this way. Useful benchmarking can also happen at the portfolio level if you adjust for geographical and weather differences between sites. And it's really helpful to do this to help find performance differences between similar assets in the fleet, and it can really help detect which assets of your solar portfolio are underperforming. And this can also be useful in a different way as well if you benchmark different analysis between sites. Say you have two sites that are nearby in a desert area, one might have higher soiling than the other. This could be due to the neighbors of the solar plant, maybe farms or agriculture. So what are we looking for in our analysis? We're looking for anomalies, measurements that might be sitting just outside the normal trends or constraints we placed upon our data. Even just using inverter data, you can probably find small deviations that could lead to further indications of problems at the string and potentially the module level. It's also helpful to benchmark assets against themselves over time. More than just detecting new malfunctions, comparative analysis can also help indicate degradation. This will be helpful in acting in time to make warranty claims and while the assets are still under warranty. And other indicators can be tracked as well, such as soiling seasonality compared to rain events, so you can detect the seasons where your plant is most likely to soil more quickly. And you can also trend things like inverter overheater with air filter change correlations due to different site environments. So you may be thinking, how am I supposed to do all this analysis for all these sites we operate? And the short answer is to create as many automated processes as possible and let the computers do the heavy lifting. It's very cumbersome for a performance engineer to take all the data points and start looking for patterns. Often these issues are buried deep within the data, and only slight variations that make it really challenging to see just from trending the data and looking at graphs. Through automation and smart alarming, it can really help reduce the workload of your performance engineers. Smart alarms created using statistical algorithms and minor deviations can be detected in the data, and actionable events can be taken to remediate their effects. So now that we have our quality data, some sound statistical analysis, and automated processes, we can get even greater intelligence from our data by combining our analysis with other data systems integration like asset management software and ticketing systems. A good integration would enable fixes based on experience. The system can learn how to associate common solutions with required spare parts and alarms. And fault codes and tickets could be automated, but based on what's critical to address. And over time, alarms can be correlated with specific fixes and actions. The technicians can automatically be given work orders and proper maintenance manuals, materials, and tools to fix the problems that they're seeing on site, and reducing troubleshooting and rework time, and really maximizing the value of that truck roll. So we're going to go to our poll questions 2 and 3.
Coming up.
Thank you. So the first one is, what level of performance analytics does your O&M program currently use? Not sure. Some manual review periodically. We're just starting an analytics program, or you've been using good predictive analytics for a while. And again, that question is, what level of performance analytics does your O&M program currently use?
All right, let's see the results.
Okay, this is just about what I was expecting. I feel like the analytics programs are just kind of getting started up. Some have had good analytics for a while now. It looks like a majority have some manual review and just starting an analytics program. All right, time for this third question. So how would you value advanced performance analytics as part of an O&M service fee? Do you think this would be between 0 to 50 cents a kilowatt, 50 cents to $1 per kilowatt, or greater than $1 per kilowatt? Again, how would you value advanced performance analytics as an additional part of an O&M service fee? Okay, this is interesting as well. And I think the real value of the analytics as an O&M service fee is showing that the analytics are providing your greater return on your investment out of your solar assets, making sure they're really optimized and performing as well as they should be. Okay, now we're moving on from finding existing issues to using our data to help reduce future downtimes. Unfortunately, the techniques we've already employed can help us mitigate these larger issues in the future. We all see the value in taking care of something before it becomes expensive. However, not all the time we want to invest to get to where we want to be. The immediate solution to this problem is to hire a performance engineer and let them analyze plant performance at regular intervals, usually monthly, sometimes weekly. And they'll make the recommendations to improve plant performance as they see something is already wrong, but they might also be ill-equipped to spot trends and anomalies that could have major impact not addressed now with no analytic structure in place. So through the appropriate use of performance analytics and automation, an analysis can run continually throughout the month, and we can know today what we might not know for a month or more in the future until that engineer can get to it. So with these advanced insights, we can recommend a course of action to preempt a larger repair issue. And I'll touch on something I talked about earlier. If you have inverter filters and fans, these can be addressed preliminary with signs of stress, preventing a breakdown and a more expensive repair later. The next step, building further on our analytics platform, would be optimizing our maintenance schedules to impact our profitability. Any downtime in a plant must be managed to minimize revenue impact. And performance analytics can also help optimize our maintenance schedules for the greatest impact, using history as a guide and using forecasts and predictions of when the plant will be performing at a higher output or a lower output based off of weather. Preventative maintenance schedules are typically conducted on a calendar schedule per year as the manufacturer's requirements or dictate to maintain warranty coverage. So if you know that the summer months are coming and higher stresses will be placed upon the inverters or other plant components, you could have a minor predictive maintenance cycle or preventative maintenance cycle just before summer, and only your inverter fans and filters just make sure that they're ready to go for the higher production months in the summer and the higher stresses. Help reduce your downtimes and your revenue impacts. Major maintenance can also be delayed to a time when production will be least impacted. This can be during periods of curtailment, if you know your site's going to be curtailed for a couple of days at a time, ahead of time, or lower production months during the winter when your bottom line won't be nearly impacted as much. Module cleaning is another area. If you have sites in an area that needs to have module cleaning, but if you do it at the wrong time, it can really drive your O&M cost up. So if you forecast and have some advanced cleaning algorithms in place on your panel washing, you can correct the frequency and optimal time of year on your panel washing to help get the greatest impact on production and help ensure you get the best return on your investment of that panel washing. So if you wash your panels, it doesn't rain the next month and you lose out on all your expenses for your module washing. And finally, scheduling repairs to be done when the positive impact is maximized versus the costs or losses being incurred due to component being offline. We've seen that the residential market is very good at maximizing the value of truck rolls by waiting on repairs until enough can be completed concurrently. However, that strategy doesn't quite work the same for utility scale applications, but similar principles can be followed. Through good data analytics, you can find areas in the plant that need attention and determine when the cost of repair will yield a positive return on investment for the truck roll or repair. In closing, it's a foregone conclusion that improving plant yield and driving down costs in solar is going to require substantial focus on data management in your O&M program. Manual review of the data is insufficient for dealing with large volumes of information that must be addressed to be successful. And that's why SMA is making a substantial investment in research and resources to greatly improve solar analytics and help provide you with next generation solutions and optimize your assets' performance. Thanks.
Thank you, Zach, and thank you, Ben. Quite some interesting overview of what's happening in the field of data management and how does it help O&M. And now it's time to move to the next presenter, Vishal. He will be focusing on aerial inspections and their effect. And Vishal, I'm giving you control right now.
Thanks, Kostis. I'll try to click through. Let's see. Great, perfect.
Good luck.
Thank you. Well, good morning, good evening, and good afternoon to those on the call. I'm quite curious to see where you're all dialed in from, so I think that's going to be one of the poll questions. So this is actually our second series of webinars with Solarplaza. So quite excited to actually be here. And today we're going to be talking about how as we've been deploying our solution over the last couple of years, what we are learning from the field, and also sharing some of the case studies with all of you today. So the title of the presentation today is how sophisticated aerial data solutions are transforming asset management and O&M in general around the world, and sharing some of our case studies from what we've seen in the field. I'm going to try and go to the next slide. There we go. As Kostis originally mentioned, we recently changed the name about 3 months ago from Sitemark, from DroneGrid to Sitemark, because there was a bit of confusion. We realized as soon as we started deploying our solution outside of Europe, a lot of our potential and then customers and now customers started asking us, well, why drone? Because we don't have a drone hardware. So we are actually a software company. We are an aerial data platform that's used by EPCs, O&Ms, asset owners, and IPPs, or energy producers. We started off last year, early last year, with pretty much doing acceptance testing and site inspections. And since early this year, we actually got very much into site surveys. So that's basically when the land development or even procurement of land, if that's the phase our customers are in, that's where they start using it. And all the way from engineering to progress monitoring to acceptance, and then to the annual or however often they do their inspections in that country. So we've literally expanded our entire suite of solution to cover the life cycle of the site. Our core technologies as a company are in 4 verticals. So that starts with data acquisition. So that's flight automation software, where drone pilots use our software, but also customer drone pilots, or we offer a full turnkey solution. That drives the image processing or the data processing engine that we've built in-house as well. The data analytics, where we use machine learning algorithms to basically analyze the pictures and the data that have been taken. And then, of course, the whole enterprise platform, which customers use to interact, collaborate, share, and make sense of their data. And also behind that, the whole API layer, which communicates with different softwares like asset management systems or inverter monitoring systems, for instance. So as a company, for those of you that may not be familiar with us, we are active in all 5 continents. We have over 600 sites on the platform today, and basically deploying about 50, on average, about between 30 to 50 sites, depending on the size of the sites, about every month. And today we had about 3 gigawatts on portfolio on the system today. So here's my first poll question, just so that I understand our audience better, because I started off, by asking, where. So I would like to know where you're dialing in from, because that will give us a better understanding on the situations you see on sites, and perhaps a better perspective, so that I can customize the presentation a little bit better. So which region are you calling in from? I'm quite excited to figure that out. Excellent. Okay, great. So a majority from Europe. That's always nice, because it's good because that is our home market. We are quite active in Europe, and of course Asia is our second biggest market today, and then of course the Americas, because we just started going in the Americas since March this year. So moving on to the next slide. There's a bit of a lag. Let's see here. Okay, I have my second poll question of the 3 questions today. What describes you the best? Most of our customers typically tend to be asset owners or EPCs, or IPPs as well. Not so many O&Ms, but we do have some O&Ms, some fairly large O&Ms. It's always interesting because they all have a different business model, and I like to cover different topics which are important to all a set of different audiences. Excellent. Okay, so we have more O&Ms today than asset owners, which is always interesting. I'll try my best to cover all the aspects, or most of the important aspects for O&Ms, but also I'll try and cover the other areas as well today. Thank you for that. Moving on to my next slide. There we go. So this is pretty much going to be the last slide where we talk about, I've covered this. So we are IEC compliant when it comes down to thermography, but we pretty much cover all of these different areas. Now I'm going to, for today's presentation, the 2 case studies that we've picked are focused on ground surveying and building supervision, or acceptance testing and building supervision combined, and of course 1 maintenance inspection, just to keep it a bit balanced. So one of the things what we've seen is, we've been working in several countries now, all the way from Africa to all the continents in Africa to, or African continent to the Americas, and what we've seen is that there is especially a lot of our customers, especially the ones who are fairly large, they've tried and tested some level of drone-based thermal imaging. At least that's what they started with, and then now they're exploring different areas, or they actually stopped exploring simply because they felt it was way too complex, or they were disappointed with the results, or simply that there wasn't a good enough solution that met their requirements. So one of the first key things we do see is that most of them have undermined their data acquisition complexity, because it is not easy. We've seen that over and again, where we have to convince the customers why, what failed. So kind of do a root cause analysis with them. The second typical reason we see is they really underestimated deploying it within their company, or enterprise level. So that means it's easy to do it for a site, but if you are a major player, and you have, let's say, hundreds of sites or 50 sites around the world, or even 100 sites nationally or more, it is a challenge. It's just like deploying any other IT enterprise platform, there are loads and loads of challenges that need to be addressed. The third key reason that we see is that it's very different, and I've covered that before. It's very different from deploying a couple of sites to really deploying it at scale. And I'm going to be focusing today on deploying solutions at scale, because most of the players that we've met at Solarplaza are large players. Where you're talking about everything from several hundred sites, in small sites, could be 100, 200 kilowatt peak, to several double-digit sites, all the way that go up to 100, 200 megawatts. So there is a huge challenge with regards to workflow integration, and that scale is what you want to deploy a solution that basically allows you to integrate into your workflows, so that the whole adoption across the enterprise becomes easier, but also more importantly, you don't have to make massive changes in the organization. We have quite a few interesting case studies and kind of materials on our blog post that we diligently put, I think, about once every couple of weeks whenever we've seen something interesting happening. So please do visit it, and you will see some interesting case studies, and some of which I will touch today. So this is my last poll question today. I think, how do you go about looking for a solution provider? This is an interesting one for us, because most of our sales have actually come through word of mouth, but it'll be interesting to see what most of you have done in the past when you were looking for an aerial data platform, or just simply a solution provider, which could have been a local drone pilot who might be using third-party solutions. It's the first time we've asked this question, and I'd be happy to share it with our marketing and content person as well. Great. So internet search, that seems to be a big one. Yeah, I think it's definitely something that we see a lot these days. But it's interesting that, and I'm glad to see that events like this are definitely used as an important place to look for providers. So that's one of the reasons why we believe in the Solarplaza community as well. So I'm going to go on to the next slide. Right. So what we've seen so far, and I've tried to apologize for the busy slide, but what we've tried to do is there are several aspects that need to be all synchronized in order to make sure that you get what you want out of your aerial data. It all starts with ordering, knowing what you want, and that's a challenge, because most providers out there, they're using third-party solutions, and when you use different solutions and put them together, it makes it quite a complex solution. Simply because each one of these different components don't talk to each other, because they're all black box environments. So ordering is one set that we've mapped in this entire process. The second one is either customers typically tend to have their own drone pilots, which is what we've seen in the Americas, particularly in the US, because of the Part 107 certification, which came around a couple of years ago. Then you have the data acquisition side. Then, of course, the processing of the analysis of the data that's been captured. The analysis that's typically done using third-party solutions. The visualization, which is what we have seen so far where customers have deployed previous solutions, is either manual or to a certain extent semi-automated, and enhancing of the data. So as you can see, what we've tried to do here is that this process is quite complex and segregated, where it's very manual, it's either in-house or done third-party. So you're pretty much depending on external skills, and that's something hard to measure. So you can imagine if you're a customer that's out of the US, that has several sites in the US, but also, let's say, internationally, and you might end up actually using different people. So how do you actually control the data accuracy and the consistency? That's a huge challenge that we've seen. We have a major French customer, a construction company, EPC, where we're doing several projects for them in Australia, and they reached out to us as a very last minute effort because they had tried something before and they were simply not able to deliver the acquisition standards that were expected. So it's a very much of a siloed approach. And what actually we, when we were thinking this through and mapping the whole process, that's where a single unified platform is really important, so that all that the customer sees is, okay, I want this out of my site as a report, or as a deliverable, or as a decision, let's say decision points that I need, and everything else should be automated behind it. And that's one of the reasons that we've seen with the benefits of a single platform. So just to go through some significantly important points that we've noticed with our customers is that automation here eliminates user and skill related issues. So that means you don't have to depend again on pilots or the skill set of the pilots and what they understand thermography requires through automation. Then that allows you to have data that's accurate and consistent. So whether you have a site in Chile or Australia or South Africa or the US somewhere, you are able to compare results. And that's fundamental, because you, as an O&M or as an asset owner, you want to be able to compare portfolios against each other of sites. You want to be able to compare manufacturers. You want to be able to compare modules. You want to be able to compare O&M partners as well, or other suppliers in terms of what you happen to see on that site. Digitization is key. Working on a local approach can be a challenge because most of the files are typically delivered using common cloud services, whereas having access to everything on a single platform, which is all interoperable, makes a huge difference. And of course, you want to be able to have, especially for customers who are asset owners or IPPs who have their own in-house O&M teams, they want to make sure, they may only have 20-30 people in their O&M team, and they want to make sure that if they are managing 100-odd sites in a country, they want to make sure that they're really managing that team through exception-based process. So what does this all come down into? It comes down into a few essential criteria that any drone-based inspections should cover. The first is scale matters, and I've said this a couple of times today, and I cannot stop reiterating on it, is because if whether you have a site in the tens or the hundreds, you want to think what solution can help you scale. We have a very interesting blog post on our website. I would really encourage you to read that one. Second is size matters. So whether you have a site which is a 10 kilowatt, 20, 200, or let's say 200 kilowatt, 100 kilowatt, all the way to a couple of 100 megawatts, and even bigger, you want to make sure that you're able to cover your entire portfolio, not just a few sites within your portfolio. Interoperability. This is where I'm referring to things like making sure that the platform connects into your asset management system, or your vendor management system, or your inverter systems as well, just so that you want to make sure that you are able to combine, let's say, alarm data that Ben and Zach were talking about to actual visual data on that location. It needs to be end-to-end, which means basically it maps your workflow process. That's super important, because if things don't map your workflows today, you don't want to be changing your workflows. Either it can be seen as an enabler for a certain best practice workflow, or alternatively, you want to think about, does it fit into your organizational workflow, which may already be good enough. And of course, the last one is, are you able to create a center of excellence through the platform? Which means that is it collaborative? Are you able to share data with your suppliers? Are you able securely? Are you able to share data with your customers? To have that trust building or customer intimacy, which is what is super important, especially in long-term tenders and relationships. So here's our first case study. Now, most of you may not know of Eneco. They are a big player here in Belgium. I think in Belgium, at least, they are #1 in terms of solar as an IPP. It's not a very big country. I mean, Belgium has a total output of 3.5 gigawatts, of which half is residential and the other half is utility scale. So as a single consolidated player, they are number one. They are very big also. They are quite big in also Netherlands. It's a Dutch company, so their home market is the Netherlands. But what is important is that when they came to us last year, and there's an interesting case study about them on our blog post as well, is that they literally had 192 sites, of which we had agreed that we would first deploy it across 10, and then the next 100, and then a phased approach, which is pretty much how we follow all our deployments. Where literally they said, okay, let's fine tune the process. What is the workflow process that they had? We understood that. We mapped it in the system. We mapped it through their O&M team, which is in-house, and basically, literally within 2 months, the entire 100+ sites that we had agreed on in scope of the project were deployed on the platform, and basically they were using decision-making processes through the aerial data that was captured for these sites. So the reason we picked this particular customer is this is like single biggest deployment in a very short period, not in terms of megawatt size, but in terms of the number of sites that we've deployed for a single customer in a very short period. And I think it was about a month and a half or so. This is another one. So this is in Zambia, where basically the customer is building one of their first largest construction site, a PV site in Africa, where it's a very interesting project to look at, because the customers are European, but building a site in Africa. And more importantly, they want to be able to monitor the construction progress. So everything from land development, where you're flattening out the land, even before that, you're trying to understand the topography, putting the builds together, what is it going to cost, and do the estimates match up to what it might actually take based on topography understanding, to literally understanding, okay, how do we, are the number of panels that are being deployed in line with the rate that we had originally planned. Most people assume that drone-based imaging is related to thermography of some sort or inspections, but it can also play a massive part in monitoring sites, remotely. Of course, you will always have your on-site teams, but to have a real collaborative platform to understand, what was your panel installation rate versus, do you have the right tracker alignment, or are they calibrated properly before going live, doing some preliminary tests. So all of these things are possible. So in this particular case, what you see is the first picture on the top is when the land development was taking place. The second phase is around where the trackers are, whether the trackers are in line or not in this particular picture. So one of the things that's happening here is that two-dimensional data is being converted into three-dimensional data to be able to understand tracker calibration. The other reason this was interesting as well is because this was one of our first projects where our customers were actually using the pilot app, which simplifies the whole image acquisition process for our image processing systems a whole lot. So basically, it makes it almost error-proof to a large extent. So that brings us to the pilot app and why image acquisition is so important. I think it was Zach or Ben who mentioned, if you have faulty data coming in, it's very hard to control what's going to be coming out. So in this particular case, whether you are an in-house, whether you have in-house pilots or whether you have external pilots or you use Sitemark or third-party pilots, it's super important that they are using a platform that is fully integrated, which means that all the way from, they can't be using a third-party pilot app, which may typically be the drone app that they use, and using a third-party processing system. It's super important that All of these things are pretty much tied together because this ensures consistent data acquisition, but also creates a situation where it's integrated into the processing system and then ultimately better results. The next one is the Field Technician app. Now this was also being beta tested today with customers, because what we've seen is customers who are using aerial data, they need to somehow be able to implement it and track how the sites are progressing on the field. So it's nice to have a view, or a helicopter view of being in Paris or somewhere else in Europe and controlling a project in Africa or Chile. But it's really important to be able to communicate on a fact basis and on a location basis, and being able to track certain work orders that people are following through on what is being expected of them on site. Most of you have probably visited super large sites. At the moment you are above a 20 megawatt site, everything looks the same, especially in a desert or in a wide open space. It's very hard to explain to people, okay, you need to go on this particular string, panel number XYZ. It's next to impossible. At least that's what we have seen. And what the pilot app, or the Field Technician app, sorry, helps customers do is that it literally gives customers directions. They're able to take pictures, especially if you have PID issues or wiring issues where people need to take pictures from behind. You need to have a solution that's literally integrated into your aerial data platform. So this is something that is used significantly, and also I think whether you use ours or somebody else's, we really believe that for large sites it makes a lot of sense. We've also seen a case study recently, and we'll be talking about that in Milan, where a customer in France had a roof which still was made from asbestos, and they knew that they had the inverter reporting was definitely low, and they needed somehow to know exactly where the problems were, so that they could minimize the amount of time spent on the roof, because they needed a specialized team to go there and not just send their own O&M team. So that helped them basically reduce cost, because the technician app allowed them to go exactly where the problems were, like hotspots because of soiling or strings down where the fuse had to be changed. And all of these issues were spent, the amount of time spent on site was a lot less compared to otherwise. So where's the industry heading? What we've seen is that API integrations are becoming super critical. So there will be a case study. Since most of our audience today is from Europe, I hope that you're attending the event in Milan, or the ones from Americas will be attending the event in Mexico City, both in October, where we'll be actually sharing a case study with 3E, who's we've been working with for some time now, to develop an API base for their monitoring system, which is Synaptic. Where we'll go into details on how Synaptic uses aerial data to basically take better informed decisions, where they're merging inverter level reporting with visual aerial reporting. The next one that seems very high on the agenda of customers and the market as well, is site comparison. How does site A compare to site B within my portfolio? How does site A compare to the industry or the market? That's becoming super important as well. And especially as you start scanning more and more sites, it becomes very interesting to start looking. It becomes very interesting to start looking at being able to compare sites to the market. Of course, site health scores as well. What are the types of issues? So really deep diving into AI and machine learning related scoring for a site based on the type of anomaly. So it's not just about knowing what sites, how many issues you have, but it's about understanding how bad they are and what could be done about it. And of course, much more. This is just the start of it. Even we learn every single month through feedback from the market and the industry on what we could be doing with the data. So this is our last slide. So we will be at SPI International, which is in Anaheim, USA. We'll be at Hall C. So please, if you are in town for the event, we would love to meet you there. If you are our customers there, we would love to have you there as well. Then there is Solarplaza in Mexico in October, like I said, and of course, Solarplaza Event in Milan, and we'll be there. Every couple of months, actually, we have our internal webinar as well. So for our existing customers or new customers as well, or potential customers, please register on the webinar link below, and we try to have our existing customers present, how they are using the platform, what they're doing with the data, in a more let's say non-confidential way. We try to anonymize their data to a certain extent. If they are comfortable with sharing their data and experience, they do that as well. So it's very interesting to see, how customers are driving the product roadmap to a large extent for us, and more importantly, getting feedback, but also sharing best practices between South Africa and Japan, for instance. So that's something, those are the kind of things you can expect to see in our webinars. That is pretty much it. Thank you very much. And I'd be happy to take questions.
All right. Thank you very much, Vishal. And before Ben and Zach, we only have a few minutes left, so please allow me to move directly into the Q&A. So one question that we have been getting a lot is about APIs, and specifically for SMA. Maybe we can start from them. Which monitoring systems do SMA? With which monitoring systems do you already have APIs setups to allow flow of data for the analytic processing? Maybe Ben, you can comment on this, or Zach?
Yeah, we do that with several of them. GPM is a big partner of ours that we use quite a bit, but we have several throughout Europe and in the Americas that we actually have to API connect with whatever the customer's using. So that's a common thing, actually, is especially when you're taking over a plant that's already been it's already existing. Oftentimes you've got to go in and look at the availability of the data, how it's managed, what the SCADA system is. And sometimes you even have to partner with what their existing monitoring program is. A lot of times the owners and investors are already getting data and like to have more control via their own monitoring platform, especially if they're an asset manager type. So we do API with a lot of them. I'm sorry I don't have a better, more specific answer for you on that, but it's very common that we have to actually build an API or work with whatever's there on site.
All right, thank you. Vishal, from your perspective, you mentioned already 3.
I was on mute, sorry for that. So, this is actually really our first time looking at APIs. So we do get requested a lot with APIs, what kind of APIs do we have? So this is with regards to inverter monitoring. We knew this was on our roadmap for some time. The question is, we don't have, so 3E, the reason we decided to go with 3E first as a case study and a pilot was for 2 reasons. The first is, Eneco, one of the first case studies, customers that we talked about, they're on 3E. 3E is Synaptic solution, and it just made sense that this was the next logical step for us to get into. So that's the first. It requires a lot of trial and error on one side, but also the customer has to be willing to take it to that level. Okay, so that's one. The second thing is when we talk about asset management systems, that's the next big one that we see, where customers want to be able to track their, when modules are being changed. So especially when we see a broken panel or something that requires a module to be replaced, they want to be able to track it, so that, for instance, the next time a technician is on site, they know that this particular module with serial number XYZ had been replaced with module number with a module with the serial number ABC at some point in time in the past. So that's the next thing that we see happen in the industry. So asset management systems is so inverter monitoring systems is one. I think that's a key. And second, we will talk later on about is asset management systems and how we are changing, how we are getting into that.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. I think it was mentioned in both presentations, data quality. It's also a topic that we will be speaking on during the conference. So how important is the quality of data that you receive or you capture through your platforms? And there will be also a follow-up question on this. Maybe we can start again with Ben or Zach.
Yeah, this is Zach. The quality of data is really crucial to doing any sort of sound analytics. Like I mentioned in my presentation, if you don't have good data coming into your analytics program, or you haven't scrubbed it or filtered data out at all, you really can't draw any useful conclusions from it. And you might think you have a problem at the site and dispatch a technician to do some work that may not be needed, and then you've wasted the dollars on a truck roll and the technician's time potentially fixing another issue on site. So I think it's hugely important.
Yeah, of course. I have a follow-up question specifically asked for you, Zach. Maybe you can help Rishab with this. So the question is, let's say that in a plant you have, let's say, bad data for a couple of days. And is it okay to omit and then continue from there? How does this affect the quality of data?
A couple of days shouldn't be too much of a problem unless it's a highly critical plant where you have a lot of curtailments. That might be more of a challenge if you have a couple days of data missing. But for just performance analytics, I think you can just omit the several days of bad data and pick up where you left off or after the data quality has returned.
All right, thank you. There's another interesting question. I think this could apply to both presenters or all three of you. There is a question about you're talking about O&M for plants, but what is the minimum size of what you call a plant? So actually, in this case, for your solutions, when does it make sense to use it? Is I don't know, like 20 kilowatt rooftop make sense to be used in your solutions, or do you require, for example, 100 kilowatts or more to make it cost effective?
Should I go first or
please do?
Go for it.
Yeah. Sorry. Okay. I don't want to interrupt. So basically, it all depends on a couple of factors. The first depends on what category of a customer you are, or provider you are. So if you're an IPP or an asset owner, we do have a few customers where we've seen that they have 50, 60, 80 kilowatt sites, here in Belgium and France. And they do, at least in France, for instance, they are obliged, maybe contractually, I think, and also by regulations, to do a thermal inspection every year. So the typical approach they've been doing is using these kind of cherry picker type these dollies, which are on a truck so far to do their thermal inspections. And I think what we have seen from experience is that for us at least, if the site is more than 150 to 200 kilowatts peak, then it makes sense financially speaking, at least, to do it. That means you're assuming that you're using Sitemark's turnkey, full turnkey solution. That means you pretty much order and it's done. That's anywhere in the world. But I think if you have your own, let's say, tech team doing it, so this is something that would definitely be applicable in the US or France, where the drone regulations are a lot less complicated and less, let's say, stringent, in the sense, not by saying anybody can fly. It's just it's much easier to get a license. and cheaper as well. Then, of course, we have seen scenarios where customers fly themselves, and they just use the platform. And then, of course, whether it's 30 kilowatt peak or 50 kilowatt peak or even 100 kilowatt peak, it doesn't really matter because they would be there on site anyway.
Thank you, Vishal. Ben, you also wanted to put in?
Sure. Yeah, I'd say that some of the numbers that Vishal is throwing out, 150, 200, 300 kilowatt, are really important to look at. And and a lot of this depends on how automated your analytics program is that you're using. Obviously, if you've got a fully automated program, a smaller site, it's not going to be hard to do. You can throw it in with the other things that you're doing. However, if part of what you're currently doing requires performance engineering, manual work, then you really want to avoid some of the smaller sites because your return, the amount of time you're spending doing that type of analytics is not going to be helpful for what you're doing. So typically, yeah, we're seeing in the lower range of what we're seeing for O&M plants that we're taking on is probably 200-300 kilowatts and up, and typically 1 megawatt or higher is what we're usually involved in.
All right, thank you. Ben, for you, another question. What are the most important parameters that can help predict inverter failures?
I'm sorry, the most important parameters for inverter failures?
Yeah, that parameters that can predict inverter failures.
Well, this would be a good one for our technicians to answer, the guys that are in the monitoring center looking at this stuff. I might not have a good answer on that one.
Are you bringing them in Milan?
What's that?
Are you bringing them in Milan?
Oh, no. We will have some folks from our operations center in Ulm there, though. Zach, do you have any input on this one? I don't have any particular parameters off the top of my head to say.
Yeah, I mean, I think it all depends on kind of the data points you have coming from your inverter. Obviously, you want to look at things like temperatures and cabinet temperatures, voltages, currents, just all the readings you have available, and then start doing analysis, comparing those to different types of fault codes when inverters go offline, and then making your assumptions based off that.
All right, thank you. Last question is for Vishal. Maybe it wasn't clear enough. The question is if Sitemark is using local drone pilots to go inside and how the quality of the measurements can be consistent and comparable to another site done with another equipment. I can answer very briefly that it's fully automated solution with local drone pilots, if I'm not mistaken. And please, Vishal, you can build on this.
Yes, exactly. So we do use local drone pilots. So today, for example, the pilot app that is used is fully integrated with DJI systems. So that means, if they're using DJI hardware, that pretty much has around 70-80% market share in the world for commercial platforms of drones, then they pretty much, integrate into our systems. So that's what allows us to be consistent in terms of, so the system actually automatically plans how the drone is going to be flying up to, I think, 20 different parameters on the platform. And then, of course, when the pilot is actually on site and when he presses start, the system actually so this is a feature that we've just recently launched where the system actually even follows the terrain. So for instance, this is a particularly challenging issue in Japan, which is where it's a very high panel density location, and it can also be very hilly. So most providers end up having a flat, let's say a single altitude flight. Our systems actually follow the modules so that it keeps a consistent resolution and precision as well.
All right. Thank you very much, Vishal, Ben, and Zach for your presentations and for the Q&A. It's now time to wrap up the webinar. So first of all, many thanks to our attendees for their input and participation, and I hope the webinar was of value to you. If you have any questions or remarks, feel free to reach out to me at Kostis@solarplaza.com or, of course, to our speakers directly. Of course, we hope to meet you at our conference in Milan, where we will be building on this topic and many more. And of course, we also have other upcoming conferences: Solar Asset Management in Mexico and Central America, and Unlocking Solar Capital Asia held in Singapore. So I wish you all a great day or a good night, depending on where you are. And personally, I look forward to meeting you in Milan. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kostis. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.